Manipulation was becoming something of a trend in Corvo's life. First when he was taken from his home as a young man, forced to live his life as a royal protector, then blamed for murdering the woman he loved. Soon after, he became an unstoppable force used by the Loyalists like a weapon. They soon turned out to be no better than Hiram Barrows or Thaddeus Campbell. Havelock and the others, afraid of being punished for their recent actions, turned on Corvo before assuming command of the Empire. They claimed to have no part in Corvo's actions, depicting themselves as heroes, and as the Lord Protector found himself washed up in the flooded district, he knew Emily, his daughter, had been taken once again. He was still weak from the poison, but thanks to Samuel, he had only been given a half dose. Maybe there was hope after all. Maybe he would still get the chance to take the heads of Havelock, Pendleton, and Martin. Of all the people to find Corvo floating down the river, it was Dowd who pulled him to dry land, the man who had killed Jessamine and started this nightmare. He knew things about Corvo, his role in recent events, about the mark on his hand, but Dowd didn't know the man, and for that, he couldn't take any chances. He discarded Corvo's equipment before locking him away. The poison still lingered in his veins, but he had recovered enough strength to try and flee his decrepit cell. Clearly these whalers had underestimated him, believing a few wooden boards would hold him. He found a knife nearby, but little else. There was a letter describing Dowd's plan for Corvo. Admiral Havelock was now the new Lord Regent. He wanted Corvo alive to legitimize his lies, so the whalers were waiting until the bounty was high enough before delivering the Lord Protector. He passed some whalers and went looking for his equipment at a nearby refinery. Along the way he found corpses of a few dozen overseers. They had attempted to raid Dowd's lair, but were severely overpowered. These whalers possessed the same powers that Corvo did. He remembered them being used at Jesmine's murder. Dowd had met the outsider. The black-eyed man must have known what was going to happen. He must have known Jessamine was going to die, and he enabled Dowd to do it. Corvo looked at the back of his hand with newfound hatred. From the start he was being used, not by lords nor politicians, but by God himself. Dowd was on one side, the catalyst for this chaos. Corvo was on the other, the noble protector who avenged his empress. Two opposing players in a bloody game of power, for the enjoyment of the outsider. There was little Corvo could do about this now, for he knew the game was ending, one way or another. He entered the refinery grounds, avoiding a group of weepers, and climbed to the top of the structure. Once inside, he descended with care. More weepers lurked within. At the bottom, his gear sat in the muck, but thankfully nothing was damaged. After equipping himself, he saw a familiar face, a deep red uniform, a bold branded scalp. Thaddeus Campbell shuffled through the darkness. Thick black blood ran from his eyes and mouth. He choked on it often, throwing it up all over the floor. He looked all so pale. The void would come for him soon. This was the fate for the old High Overseer, the alternative to a quick knife through the chest. But Corvo felt no guilt. He chose to spare Campbell, to expose his crimes and let others decide what to do with him. They chose well. Returning to Rudshaw waterfront, he blinked between rooftops, passing through the station to central Rudshaw. Before him was the old Chamber of Commerce, Dowd's headquarters. There were a lot of whalers about. Corvo assumed they were expecting another attack from the Abbey. He passed them unseen, and made his way to Dowd himself. The assassin pondered inside his quarters, pacing the room as he recorded an audiograph. Corvo blinked to a bookshelf just above him. Here he was, meters apart from the monster who had killed the woman Corvo loved. He could do it. All he had to do was blink behind Dowd and thrust his dagger through the man's heart. No one would miss him. But as he pondered taking Dowd's life, he spoke of regret. He wished he hadn't killed Jessamine for all the trouble it had caused, for the reputation it gave him as a monster. Jessamine was loved by many in Dunwall. If people knew who really killed the Empress, Dowd wouldn't be feared, he would be hated. He then spoke of leaving Dunwall, to stop killing altogether. He was done being a pawn for the outsider. So the assassin had realized it too, that he was given the outsider's mark for nothing more than to cause chaos. Not to fulfill a prophecy, nor to save the world, but because he happened to be in a position to plummet the world into a new age of turmoil. What stayed Corvo's blade was that Dowd realized this. His other targets had been blinded by their desires, their greed for power and purpose. But he was a man who understood his limits, and his own position in reality, and he had had enough. Corvo had a faint glimmer of respect for this man, but it was overshadowed by the memory of Jasmine's murder. What to do? Killing him would serve the outsider's thirst for blood. Mercy would be an insult to Jasmine's memory. He made up his mind. He was convinced that Dowd would flee Dunwall if Corvo sent him a warning, so that is what he did. Using the outsider's mark, he slowed down time, then blinked behind Dowd whilst his back was turned, pickpocketing a bone charm, stealing the master key from his desk before blinking back out of sight. Dowd didn't notice a thing, and Corvo was free to escape the flooded district. He hoped the assassin would get the message, but if not, Corvo would make sure to check in on the flooded district once Emily had been crowned. Using the old sewers, he headed back to the Hound Pits, not knowing what he was expecting to find. Emily and the Loyalists had almost certainly left, but there could still be clues as to where they went. Corvo got to see a much darker side of Dunwall. He was walking through the poorest districts in the city, where mass graves were piling high and ordinary citizens faced isolation in their final days. He found a group of infected hiding from the patrolling tallboys in an old apartment. One of them said he had friends coming to get them out, but there were arc pylons in the way. Corvo felt pity for them, so he cleared the way for their escape. Maybe it wasn't the best thing to do, releasing infected people onto the rest of the city, but they were doomed either way. A few days of freedom would ease their suffering. Along the way, he soon came across a curious sight. The Bottle Street gang had started an assault into the sewers, chasing Granny Rags, but were defeated by swarms of rats. Slackjaw was taken. He found Granny Rags within a large chamber. She had Slackjaw in chains, and was about to perform a ritual that required his bones. Granny asked for Corvo's help in killing the Slackjaw, whilst he pleaded for freedom, offering a way out of the sewers. Maybe once, Corvo had considered Granny Rags to be resourceful, if a bit strange, but this was madness. He tried to knock her out with a sleep dart, only for her to disappear, leaving a swarm of rats in her place. Slackjaw said there was a way to stop her for good, to make her immortal. She had a cameo, a pendant from a necklace which held her power. Corvo found it, and threw it into the furnace. Granny Rags used her rage to summon more rats, but now she was vulnerable. This time, the sleep dart worked. After killing the rats and freeing Slackjaw, he handed Corvo a key to the sewers and thanked him. The Bottle Street gang were all but disbanded. Slackjaw's men had mostly turned to weepers, or had been eaten by rats. His days as a gang leader were over. Not that it bothered Corvo too much. It was one less thing to worry about once order had been restored. Finally, he reached the Hound Pits, but all was far from well. He met Cecilia, one of the house staff, locking herself inside another apartment. She explained to Corvo what had happened. Wallace and Lydia had been killed, but Callista was spared because of the connections with her uncle. She had locked herself inside Emily's tower. Besides this, Samuel had gone missing, along with Pierre and Sokolov. Meanwhile, Emily had been taken with Havelock, Martin and Pendleton. After blinking to the rooftops and eavesdropping on the guards, he learned that Sokolov and Pierre were alive. They had barricaded themselves within the workshop, so Corvo paid them a visit. The two inventors were getting along quite well despite the circumstances, and had been busy making an advanced version of the arc pylon. This could be used to put all the guards to sleep, or turn them to ash. Corvo decided on the former. After obtaining the blueprints of the pylon from Havelock's old room, he powered up the device. Pierre set it off, and a huge pulse shook the ground. Then all the guards had collapsed. It worked. Next, Corvo checked his room, and found a picture of himself, drawn by Emily. He felt relief, knowing that she was still okay. She had also left a letter. The Loyalists had taken her to King Sparrow Island, a huge lighthouse and fort off the coast of Dunwall. He knew Havelock would be waiting for him. That is where he would make his last stand. Once again, Corvo pulled himself from the brink of death. Once again, he questioned who to call friend. But luckily, The few who remained loyal to him and Emily were there to offer any help they could. Now his quest was clear. No more politics, no more lies. He knew who his targets are, and where they now hide. What will Corvo face on King Sparrow Island? Will he finally be able to protect Lady Emily and bring stability back to the Isles? It all ends next time on Tell Me a Story. Please subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.